Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, July 10th, 2025, and today we're going to discuss making perishable greens and such last in the cooler, plus other harvesting tips, a cover crop for root knot nematodes, and a Bokashi composting tomato situation. So let's do it. All right, happy Thursday, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed our interview with Dr. Patrick Fries yesterday as much as I did. I plan to continue doing interviews with soil scientists too in regards to soil sampling and testing because I think it's interesting, and I also think it's a good idea to understand how these tests work and exactly what they're measuring. Here on the farm this week, it's been cooler, and by cooler, I mean it's still been hot, but slightly cooler. We did the typical stuff like harvesting and planting and starting seeds, and we pruned our tomatoes, which feels like such an annoyingly large task every 10 or so days, which it really needs to be done every week, but I'm not going to pretend I always accomplish that. We will see how far I can get into the season before I devolve into my typical jungle pruning. Last year it was around now, but we'll see. I'm hoping for August. That's the goal. Anyway, so I like Thursdays for lots of reasons. Good things have probably happened to me on Thursdays in my life. Probably. That's a thing. It's not harvest day generally, so I typically get to spend it doing different things, different garden tasks, which is fun. And it's the day when I take on 3 Patreon questions to get caught up over there. We recently discovered a cache of questions that came in through our contact form on our website, but did not come directly to us, so we didn't know about them. And again, apologies for that. But if you do ever have a pressing question, Patreon is the absolute way to go. And also a reminder that the July show thread is up, so make sure to get your questions in, Patreon members. Our first Patreon question of the day is actually itself like 4 questions and comes to us from Adam Van Quick, who writes, quote, "What should or shouldn't be direct seeded or transplanted out in the field when it's raining? I currently only have a refrigerator for harvested crops. What is the best way to store produce in a refrigerator that is going to be sold at farmers markets? What produce should be stored in a refrigerator? Which produce needs to be washed before selling at farmers markets? Can root crops such as carrots and radishes be sold without washing them?" End quote. That may have actually been 5 questions, but anyway, awesome, Adam. Thank you for all these questions. And so let's just bust them all out individually. First, what should or shouldn't be seeded or directly transplanted out in the field when it's raining? Well, seeding in the rain is not generally advisable because wet soil or even just like compost mulch is going to clog the seeder. It'll get stuck in the wheels and kind of cling to the little shoe that digs the furrow. And anyway, the seeds are also going to get wet, which is not great, especially if you don't use all those seeds and you want to use them later. It's just not a great idea to do anything in the rain with a seeder. Ideally, you hit the seeding just before it rains to make sure they get well watered in. It's weirdly satisfying when that works out well, especially in a dry farming situation. Now, for transplanting, that's really all reliant on the soil conditions and your tolerance for getting soaked, I suppose. For instance, when the soil is well mulched, especially with the compost mulch, you can plant pretty much whenever you want just because mud is not an issue and the mulch is in a perpetual state of readiness. If you have to prepare the soil at all, though, you cannot really do that in the rain. It will do more harm than good to work wet soil. So yeah, don't do that. Next, what is the best way to store produce in a refrigerator that is going to be sold at a farmer's market? Well, it depends on the product. Think of the cooler as a giant cold dehydrator. So any greens need to be protected in sealed containers, even if that's just bags, but it could be totes or whatever. In other words, if you just set your kale bunches or lettuce heads into that refrigerator in open bins, you will have wilted greens within a few hours. This pretty much goes for everything, though. Carrots, radishes with greens on, those sorts of things, green onions, pretty much everything you would not want to get wilted, limp, or dry. Make sure it's just in a sealed or semi-sealed container, like a bin with a lid or a closed bag. The exceptions are things like squash, zucchini, cucumbers, and other fruits, which we find benefit from a small amount of breathing. So leave the lid slightly cracked in that case, or the bag slightly opened. You also asked what produce should not be stored in a refrigerator. Ideally, tomatoes and potatoes should be kept closer to 45 degrees, although cherry tomatoes are largely fine in a refrigerator. Again, a little open air is fine for either of those crops, for any of those crops. Garlic is fine to be left out. Sweet potatoes, you keep those out of the refrigerator. Onions, once they're cured, you'll actually want to refrigerate those for a while just to keep them fresh. You also asked which produce needs to be washed before selling at farmers markets, and can root crops such as carrots and radishes be sold without washing them? Ideally, your lettuce can be just kind of cut in the field and bagged and sold in that way, but in wetter climates, that can be a little bit tough because bugs and dirt splashed onto the leaves from the rainfall. Water is where you start running into risk of contamination, so I try to avoid getting stuff wet, but it's hard in our climate because lots of stuff wants to climb on the lettuce. I talked about washing produce way back, I think in 2024, but I'm not sure. It could have been 2025. But generally, if it's dirty, it's good to wash it for a farmer's market because people like to buy clean food and not dirty food. So as for carrots and radishes, it will help sell them. Is that frustrating? Yeah, it can be, and it adds to your labor costs for sure, but people don't want to necessarily purchase their food with a side of work. So yeah, it's good to wash it. They just kind of want the food ready to chop up and dress and eat it. So make that easy on them and they will make it easy on you by purchasing it in bulk. Selling to a CSA can be a little more flexible on those things, but by and large, wash the produce in clean water, dry it thoroughly, and store it at 39 degrees Fahrenheit for greens or just below 4 Celsius, selling it within a few days of harvest to keep it as fresh as possible. Anyway, was all that helpful? Did I answer all the questions? I think I did. Let me know what I missed. Otherwise, when we come back, we will take a question about nematodes versus sun hemp, BRB. I'm enjoying this hat. I feel like these are the Farm FC colors, right? Like navy and gold. Although, actually, I think the Farm FC colors should be brown and sea green. I like that combo. That seems more our style anyway. This can be for the third kit.
Hey no-till growers, it's Austin from Vital Root Farm up in the far north of Minnesota in zone 3 something. We run a 6-share CSA on our new farm, and today is harvest day. Garlic scapes are in, and we're having a great time. Thanks for all you guys do.
Heyo, name's Carlan. We're out here at the tip of the Olympic Peninsula about to harvest some herbs because I'm all about the herbs. I'm all about that dip. In fact, I think I'm gonna name this farm Little Dipper Farm because it's all hummus, it's all pesto, baby.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. If you're listening to this, you probably found 5 rare minutes to breathe, but what got pushed back further down the to-do list to make that happen? If it's your CSA newsletter, you're not alone. Farmhand's new newsletter builder was made for busy farmers. It automates weekly emails, drives add-on sales, and makes it easy to keep your customers in the loop without spending hours behind a screen. It launches this summer, but our listeners can request early access now. Visit farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question, second one, comes to us from Patreon member Laurel in Northwestern Ontario, who asks, quote, does growing sun hemp really suppress root knot nematodes? I have been turning under French marigolds for the past few years. Before doing this, I wasn't able to successfully grow most vegetables. I do have sandy soil in zone 2B, and they are a huge problem in my main growing area. Roots before marigolds were covered with round galls and extremely stunted. Is there anything you can suggest? I am trying to transition to no-till. Thank you so much for your time, Laurel, end quote. All right, so we have talked a few times about root knot nematodes, but not so much about sun hemp, and not, in fact, in a very cold climate like that. First, so root knot nematodes, just to recap, are a type of parasitic pest that attacks the roots of plants. Their feeding causes those galls, as our Patreon member describes here, in the roots that restrict the plant's ability to grow and look, well, the results look like knots in the roots. Cover crops in general have been shown to have positive effects on these dorks for a number of reasons. Increases in soil organic matter bring in microbes who are antagonistic to the parasitic nematodes, including the fungi that snatch them up, like literally wrap little things around them, which is definitely among the cooler things that some fungi can do. Sun hemp, for its part, is a pretty versatile crop used in some areas as a fiber crop, in fact. Hence hemp in the name. It is also used as a leguminous cover crop that grows fast and is considered a non-host to the root knot nematodes, as well as producing some nematocidal compounds in their roots roots as well as their leaves, arguably more so in the leaves. Incorporation of the leaves and roots into the soil has been shown to reduce the survival of nematodes, but the shoots were more effective than the roots, meaning incorporation, tilling in, of the material might be where sun hemp has its greatest impact, similar to your marigolds, which is often the case with cover crops for prescriptive, pathogenic issues like that, like mustards and pathogenic fungi, for instance. The mustards work best when the residue is actually worked into the soil versus when it's just left on the surface. Now, it is not a cure-all, the sun hemp, and there is no guarantee that it won't work any better than your marigolds are. There are studies that show no substantial difference and studies that show significant successful usage of sun hemp. Several studies, it seems, do report greater levels of beneficial organisms that feed on the parasitic nematodes, as well as suppression from growing the sun hemp, but it really needs to be used alongside things like compost and other healthy soil practices just to maintain its effectiveness. So effectively, I think taking a season to address them by working sun hemp into the soil with some really healthy compost might be the best thing to start your transition. After that, you're probably going to have to maintain healthy soil practices to encourage soil organic matter and healthy beneficial soil organisms that will crowd out or consume the nematodes you don't want. As always, once you get those garden beds ready to roll, keep them covered as much as possible, planted as much as possible, which in Zone 2B is not going to be the easiest thing to do because you don't have the longest season, but as long as you can keep it planted, and disturb it as little as you possibly can, adding a good compost and being vigilant about detecting infections as much as you can to stay ahead of them or know when you need to do maybe another treatment with marigolds or cover crops or whatever. Obviously, I don't have to tell you this, but root knot nematodes are a tough pest, so I do wish you and everyone else dealing with them luck, and hopefully this was at least a little bit helpful in terms of how the sun hemp can help. The other thing I don't really know, just thinking about this, is how well sun hemp will do in Zone 2B. It's kind of a tropical crop, or how that colder climate might change its efficacy. It may increase or decrease those compounds that are effective against the nematode. I don't know. What I do know is that we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, Bokashi composting and tomato death. Yeah, be right back.
Hey there, my name is Rachel, and welcome to my backyard garden here in Phoenix, Arizona. Right now, this time of year, we are really prioritizing shade. We had a really nice introduction into spring and even summer with some pretty cool weather, but it's definitely still pretty warm.
Hi, I'm Frederique.
Hello, I'm Gabe.
We're Wilder Witch Farms, and we're in Humboldt County up in Northern California, and this is how the farm is going.
Hi, I'm Joy from Zone 6B, New York, Mid-Hudson, getting a much-needed rainstorm. Otherwise, the summer is coming along. The plants need it, I need it, so we'll harvest more. Talk to you all again soon.
All right, our third and final question of the day comes to us from Loke Nielsen, who writes, quote, I've been trying Bokashi, love the process, even the smell for some reason, more microbial activities to follow. Anyway, I was a bit quick with applying it around my tomatoes as I planted, and they're suffering. After fermenting for a month, I let the batch rest in plastic boxes, mixed with a quality soil mix to let it settle for another 3 weeks, compost, cow manure-based mix, but apparently this wasn't enough. I first thought it was the cold soil from our cold May that shocked the tomatoes, but I got more and more suspicious as the days went on and started looking for reasons. Finally, I found some information that Bokashi, when applied to soil, changes the pH for a few weeks until balancing out. All the tomatoes have deformed new leaves, and their older leaves are yellow and black mostly. Is this a sit tight and wait it out situation? Should I take any drastic measures? I made a bit of a trial on one row and applied lime around the plants, yet to see any difference there. I keep telling myself mistakes like this are great for next season. It's almost working. Smiley face emoji. Thanks again for all the entertainment and knowledge, end quote. All right. Thanks, Loke. Interesting question here. Now, for those of you who don't know what Bokashi is, there are quite a few ways to do it, and there is a difference between what traditional Bokashi looks like and what modern Bokashi looks like. But Bokashi is basically pickling food waste in an anaerobic container. Essentially, you buy some bran that is inoculated with some various beneficial microbes, which includes, for instance, lactobacilli that create the lactic acid, which we commonly associate with sauerkraut or sour pickles or kimchi, etc. Anyway, you buy this mix of microbes and carbon, like bran or sawdust, and essentially sprinkle that on top of the food scraps, kept in an airtight container. A liquid forms that is strained off of the bottom, though this liquid is highly acidic, so it should not be added directly to gardens. Again, think pickle juice. You allow it to ferment for a few weeks, as Loke described here, and then often it is buried or composted. So Bokashi compost is a bit of a misnomer because it is more of a preserved food scrap than a compost, but it can be a nice option for food, for kitchen scraps, especially for homeowners in less rural areas, because Bokashi is relatively tame, smell-wise. However, it also produces a highly acidic product that can potentially harm plants if not allowed adequate time to break down. So what I believe is probably happening here is one of two things. One, the compost cow manure mixture you described could have been already contaminated with some sort of persistent herbicide, meaning it wasn't the Bokashi at all, but rather the material that you kind of mixed it with there. Or two, the acids of the Bokashi material were just not broken down adequately or dispersed adequately and are lightly pickling the roots of those tomato plants, or at least pickling the area around the tomato plants. Is there a lot that can be done after you plant? If it's only been a few days or a week or so, you can dig up the plants and try to move them, giving the Bokashi area some more time to settle. Or you could try to flush the soil, leach it with water if the soil around them generally drains adequately. It's not my favorite option, just for the other nutrients you may lose, but for mature plants could be the only one to kind of like wash out some of that acidity. Now, could there be a third problem going on here unrelated to the Bokashi, like a viral disease or poor drainage? Possibly, but you should be able to identify those by comparing the leaves to photos online of, say, bacterial wilt, root knot nematodes, etc. For me, I think Bokashi is cool in a way, but just generally be careful with using it within 6 months of making it unless you're going to run it through a typical composting process, which in some ways kind of defeats the purpose of Bokashi. But what's nice about it is that you can deal with those food scraps in situ, like in your kitchen, and then you can take them out to the compost all at once later. I will allow others in the comments to flesh out the details on this system and how it's worked for them or how it hasn't worked for them. In fact, I'd like to hear, have there been other situations that you've put Bokashi in your garden and been like, oops? Be curious to find out. Otherwise, I'm going to call it a Thursday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and or subscribe and or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Seriously, just share it with some friends. That makes a huge difference. Enormous thank you to all of our sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No Till Growers for their support. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat, one of these hats that I'm wearing now, or the corduroy one. Awesome. Or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at no-tillgrowers.com. That supports our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of July, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Christine Albrecht. Thank you, Christine. Awesome. Christine's been a long time member. Shouts to Christine. All right, so back to our dragon and our little boy. Well, the thing that we lose, I suppose, when we lose our relationships to this ancient and in its early life stages microscopic creature is that what the heck does it eat? And the boy tries everything he can think of to feed this tiny dragon, and the growing dragon will eat some of it, but never looks particularly enthusiastic about any of it until one day the dragon seems to spot a rat running outside, and suddenly the small dragon leaps out of the tank, bursts through the window. Luckily, it was open and just kind of breaks the screen, and chases down its lunch. Then, to the amazement of the boy and the bemusement of his mother, it happily saunters back into the room, curls up on the bed, and goes to sleep, satisfied. She's a rat dragon, the boy says, and his mom, being the cool mom that she is, speculates about how many rat-borne disease outbreaks could have been stopped throughout history if we had not lost our relationship to the rat dragons. But what neither of them knew at that time was they were not the only one who saw the dragon snag the rat. That is for tomorrow on the rat dragon. I kind of like the rat dragon. It's fun. It's fun to say. All right, thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you then. Bye.